The moment my sister Eleanor walked into the funeral home and saw the man standing beside me, her face went completely white. For 6 years, she thought she'd won. For 6 years, she believed she'd stolen my happily ever after. But standing there in my custom Armani dress, holding hands with my husband, a man worth more than she could ever imagine, I watched her perfect world crumble in real time. Let me take you back to where this all began, because trust me, this story is nothing like what you'd expect. 6 years ago, I was 25 and madly in love with a man named Marcus. He was everything I thought I wanted: tall, handsome, successful in real estate, and he just proposed to me with a ring that cost more than most people's cars. I was on cloud 9, planning our dream wedding, when my sister Eleanor, 3 years older and always the jealous type, decided she wanted what I had. Eleanor had always been competitive with me. Growing up, if I got A's, she needed A+. If I had a boyfriend, she'd find a way to make him notice her instead. But Marcus was different. He was mine, and I was sure nothing could come between us. I was wrong. It started with little things. Eleanor would accidentally run into us at restaurants, looking stunning in outfits that cost her entire paycheck. She'd laugh a little too loudly at Marcus's jokes, touch his arm when she talked to him, and find excuses to text him about family matters. I confronted her about it, but she just smiled that innocent smile and said, "Solana, you're being paranoid. I'm just being friendly." The night before our engagement party, Marcus called me. His voice was shaky, distant. "Solana, we need to talk." Those 5 words still echo in my mind. I met him at our favorite coffee shop, the same place where he'd first said he loved me. But this time, his eyes couldn't meet mine. "I can't marry you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt like the world had stopped spinning. "What? Marcus, what are you talking about? The party is tomorrow. Our families are coming. We've sent the invitations. I'm in love with someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. "Who?" He looked up then, and I saw the guilt written all over his face. "Eleanor." I don't remember much about what happened next. I think I screamed. I know I threw my coffee at him. I definitely called him every name in the book before storming out. But what I remember most clearly is the sound of my heart breaking, actually breaking, as I realized my sister had succeeded in destroying the most important thing in my life. The engagement party became a disaster. Eleanor showed up wearing white, and announced that she and Marcus were together now. My parents were mortified. My friends were speechless. And I ran. I literally ran out of the venue in my heels and didn't stop until I reached my car. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to stay in that town and watch my sister parade around with my ex-fiancé. I wasn't going to let her have the satisfaction of seeing me broken. So I packed my bags, quit my job, and moved across the country to Seattle. For the first year, I was a mess. I worked as a waitress, lived in a tiny studio apartment, and cried myself to sleep most nights. Eleanor would call sometimes, pretending to check on me, but I could hear the smugness in her voice when she mentioned Marcus. They got married 8 months after stealing my engagement party. The pictures on social media showed a wedding that looked exactly like the one I had planned, down to the flowers and the venue. But here's the thing about rock bottom, it's a solid foundation to build on. In my second year in Seattle, I got a job at a small tech startup. I was just an administrative assistant, but I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I took online courses at night, learned about business development, and slowly started climbing the ladder. The company was developing an app for sustainable living, and I became passionate about the mission. That's where I met Aurora. Aurora was the CEO's daughter, visiting from San Francisco. She was brilliant, funny, and had this infectious energy that made everyone around her want to be better. We became friends instantly, and when she offered me a position at her father's company in San Francisco, I didn't hesitate. "You're wasted here, Solana," she told me over coffee. "You have this incredible business instinct. Dad could use someone like you." Moving to San Francisco was like stepping into a completely different world. Aurora's father, David Chin, was a tech mogul worth hundreds of millions. Their company was on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, and suddenly I was working with the most brilliant minds in Silicon Valley. I thrived there. Within 2 years, I was heading up business development for 3 major projects. I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of, living in a beautiful apartment overlooking the bay, and for the first time since Marcus, I was truly happy. And then I met him. His name was Alexander Petrov, and he was nothing like Marcus. Where Marcus was flashy and loud, Alexander was quiet and thoughtful. Where Marcus flaunted his wealth, Alexander was so understated you'd never guess he was worth close to $1 billion from his tech investments and real estate empire. We met at a conference in Las Vegas. I was presenting our latest AI project, and afterward, this incredibly handsome man approached me. He had these piercing blue eyes and spoke with just a hint of a Russian accent. "That was brilliant," he said, extending his hand. "Alexander Petrov. I'd love to discuss a potential partnership." What started as a business dinner turned into a 5-hour conversation about everything: technology, philosophy, our dreams, our fears. Alexander had immigrated to the US as a teenager, built his fortune from nothing, and despite his success, he was remarkably humble and genuine. We started dating, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Alexander didn't just love me, he celebrated me. He encouraged my career, supported my ambitions, and treated me like an equal partner in everything. When he proposed 2 years later, it wasn't with a flashy public display. It was during a quiet moment in his garden, with tears in his eyes, asking if I'd build a life with him. Our wedding was intimate, just close friends and family. Alexander's wealth meant we could have had anything, but we chose something meaningful instead. We honeymooned in Tuscany, where Alexander had bought a villa for us to escape to whenever we needed peace. Meanwhile, back home, Eleanor's perfect life was falling apart. Through mutual friends, I heard that Marcus's real estate business was struggling. He'd made some bad investments, and they were drowning in debt. Eleanor had to go back to work for the first time in years, and the marriage was strained. But I barely thought about them anymore. I was too busy being happy. Alexander and I had been married for 2 years when Mom got sick. The diagnosis was sudden, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had maybe 6 months, the doctors said. I flew home immediately. It was the first time I'd been back since Eleanor stole Marcus, and I was nervous about seeing them. But when I walked into Mom's hospital room and saw how small and frail she looked, all the old anger seemed petty. Eleanor was already there, looking tired and older than her 34 years. Marcus was beside her, and I was shocked by how much he'd changed. The confident, successful man I'd once loved looked stressed and defeated. "Solana," Eleanor said, her voice small. "You came." "Of course I came. She's my mother too." The next few months were a blur of treatments, hope, and heartbreak. Alexander flew in every weekend to be with me, but I spent most of my time at Mom's bedside. Eleanor and I formed an uneasy truce, focused on making Mom's last months as comfortable as possible. Mom passed away on a Tuesday morning in March. Eleanor and I were both holding her hands when she took her last breath. The funeral was scheduled for the following Saturday. Alexander flew in Friday night, and when I picked him up at the airport, I could see how much the stress was showing on my face. "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know," he said, pulling me into his arms. "It's okay to grieve." Saturday morning, I chose my outfit carefully. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to honor Mom. I wore a black Armani dress that Alexander had bought me for a gala the previous month, paired with the pearl necklace Mom had given me for my college graduation. Alexander looked impossibly handsome in his tailored suit. His presence was commanding in that quiet way of his. You could tell he was important without him having to say a word. We arrived at the funeral home together, and that's when it happened. Eleanor was greeting people at the entrance, playing the role of the grieving daughter. When she saw me, her face lit up with what looked like genuine affection. "Solana, I'm so glad you're..." Then she saw Alexander behind me. The change in her expression was instant and devastating. Her face went from warm to shocked to something that looked almost like hunger. Her eyes traveled from his face to his watch, a limited edition Patek Philippe, to his shoes, to the way he carried himself. "Eleanor," I said calmly, "I'd like you to meet my husband, Alexander Petrov." Alexander stepped forward with that natural grace of his and extended his hand. "My condolences," he said simply. "Solana has told me so much about your mother. She sounds like she was an extraordinary woman." Eleanor's hand shook as she took his. "Husband," she whispered, looking between us. "We've been married for 3 years," I said, slipping my arm through Alexander's. "I know I haven't been home much, but we've been busy building our life together." I saw the exact moment Eleanor realized what she was looking at. Maybe it was the way other people in the room had started to notice Alexander, the way conversation stopped when he walked by. Maybe it was the way he commanded respect without demanding it. Or maybe it was just the way he looked at me, like I was the most precious thing in his world. Marcus appeared at Eleanor's side, and I watched his face go through the same transformation. The man who had once made me feel like I wasn't enough was now looking at me like I was completely out of his league. "Solana," Marcus said awkwardly. "You look successful." Alexander's arm tightened around me slightly, not possessively, but protectively. "My wife is incredibly successful," he said with quiet pride. "She's revolutionizing AI development in Silicon Valley. I'm constantly amazed by her brilliance." The way he said it, with such genuine admiration, made my heart swell. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Not desperate and insecure like it had been with Marcus, but confident and supportive. Throughout the funeral service, I could feel Eleanor's eyes on us. During the reception afterward, she kept finding excuses to walk by our table, to interrupt our conversations with other relatives. She was studying Alexander like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Finally, she cornered me in the bathroom. $1 billion, she hissed. "Solana, is he really worth $1 billion?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, but there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 6 years ago. Her dress was nice but not expensive. Her shoes were scuffed. Her wedding ring was the same one Marcus had originally bought for me, and now it looked small and cheap. "I don't know his exact net worth," I said honestly. "We don't talk about money much. But the article's online. You've been Googling him." Eleanor's face flushed red. I mean, when you said Petrov, I thought the name sounded familiar." "Solana, do you have any idea what you've got?" That's when I realized it. 6 years ago, Eleanor had stolen Marcus because she thought he was the best I could do. She thought she was taking my prize, my highest achievement. But she'd actually done me the biggest favor of my life. "I know exactly what I have," I said quietly. "I have a man who loves me for who I am, not what I can do for him. I have a partner who supports my dreams instead of competing with them. I have someone who makes me better every single day." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Solana, I'm so sorry. About Marcus, about everything. I thought..." "You thought you were winning," I finished. "But Eleanor, there was never a competition. You can't steal someone's destiny." I left her standing there and rejoined Alexander, who was talking with my uncle about sustainable energy initiatives. When he saw me, he immediately stopped mid-sentence. "Everything okay?" he asked, his eyes searching my face. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. As we left the funeral home that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years, grateful to my sister. She'd stolen what she thought was my happiness, but in doing so, she'd forced me to find my real happiness. Alexander and I drove to the airport in comfortable silence. As we waited for our flight back to San Francisco, he took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Today couldn't have been easy." "Actually," I said, smiling, "it was easier than I thought it would be." 6 months later, Eleanor called me. She and Marcus were getting divorced. She'd found out he'd been cheating on her with his secretary. Apparently, he had a pattern of betraying the women who loved him. "I deserve it," she said through tears. "After what I did to you." "Eleanor," I said gently, "you deserve to be happy. You just went about it the wrong way." Today, Alexander and I have been married for 5 years. We live between San Francisco and New York, we travel the world together, and we're building something beautiful. I'm now a VP at one of the most innovative tech companies in the world, and Alexander and I are working on a foundation to help young entrepreneurs get their start. Eleanor is rebuilding her life too. She's in therapy, she's dating someone new, a teacher who makes her laugh, and she's learning to be happy with herself instead of competing with others. As for Marcus, well, let's just say karma has a way of catching up with people who make a habit of betraying those who love them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Eleanor hadn't stolen my fiancé. Would I have married Marcus? Would I have stayed in that small town, never pushing myself to achieve more? Would I have ever discovered what real love feels like? I'll never know, but I'm grateful I don't have to find out. Because sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that could have happened to you. You just have to be brave enough to let it transform you instead of destroy you. And sometimes, the person who tries to steal your happiness ends up giving you the greatest gift of all, the chance to find out who you really are when everything is stripped away. That's a gift I wouldn't trade for anything, not even $1 billion.